Hello, everybody, and welcome to Third Thursday. This is PickFu's monthly live chat with our two co-founders, Justin Chen and John Lee. And I'm Kim Kohatsu. I am the CMO at PickFu. So today what we're going to talk about is how to choose a logo design. And the intent of this session is for people who aren't designers themselves, but they run a business or they're starting a product line, or they need help choosing a logo. And we are going to go through basically a 3-step process for how to go about doing that. Now, if you are watching this live, I definitely encourage you to use the comments on either Facebook or YouTube to ask us questions or just say hi. We will answer them live. And if we don't get to your question, or if you're watching the replay, you can still do that. We will try to get to your question as soon as we see it. Alternatively, you can go to this link and you can ask us any questions. You can enter to win a free poll. And that is how to get in touch with us that way. But let's go ahead and get started and talk about logo design. So there was this very famous mid-century graphic designer named Paul Rand. And he said, design is so simple, and that's why it is so complicated. And he would know. I mean, Paul Rand designed some very famous logos, from IBM to UPS, Westinghouse. He did some real classics. And I think, part of the reason it is so complicated is that every element in your logo needs to be deliberate. Like if it doesn't have a purpose, it really shouldn't be there. So I think that as you approach the idea of designing a logo for your business, you should think about colors and shapes, icons and symbols that are relevant to your business. Now, you're not going to be able to use all of them. You are not creating a collage, right? The idea is to make things simple and to take away. But to start off, I think it's just really good to sort of think about the lay of the land, right? If you're a restaurant, what kinds of ingredients might you incorporate in the logo? If there's certain colors, right? If you're like a nature type business, maybe you think about greens and browns and, nature like colors. And so really think about that as you form a foundation that you can share with your designer. And what those foundations are going to do is it's going to help you create a design brief. John, why don't you talk to us a little bit about step 1, which is creating that design brief?
Sure thing. So like Kim said, there are too many businesses who approach a graphic designer without any kind of forethought. Early on in our career, we may have been guilty of this as well. So they say, I need a logo, and they leave it up to the designer to figure out the rest. But in order to create a strong and memorable logo for your business, it's worth taking the time to consider what you want. And that's why you need to create a design brief to be able to communicate with that designer. It's a written document that clearly sets out your expectations for your logo. And so what goes in a design brief? You'll probably need something like, you're going to need the obvious stuff like your business name, exactly how it's written, the capitalization with or without .com, LLC, if there's a particular way of capitalizing or punctuating your name. For example, for PickFu, we wanted the F in PickFu to be capitalized, so we had to put that on the design brief for our designer. Or for example, if you're Build-A-Bear, there's a hyphen between every single word in Build-A-Bear. Or iPhone, where the I is lowercase and the P is uppercase in iPhone, and etc. Additionally, you want 1 or 2 sentences describing your business in a nutshell. Who your customers are, maybe who your competitors are, how your business stands out from the competition, and then any attributes that you want to be associated with your business. So whether your business is family friendly, sporty, luxurious, classic, modern, and so on. Your logo brief will only be about a page long, but just based on everything I've listed, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into this document before you hand it off to someone to start designing.
Yeah, so who is this designer? Justin, why don't you walk us through step 2?
Sure. Yeah. So if you don't have a graphic designer on staff, you're going to need to find one to do your logo. Ideally, you'll want to find a long-term working relationship with this person so that as your design needs grow and change, for example, when you're working on a new website or email templates or product packaging, that this design person can help you develop your brand cohesively across all those different mediums. So you can try the obvious places like job boards, like Facebook and LinkedIn, Craigslist, any of those recruiting platforms. Obviously, ask your network for referrals. Like those are probably the best sources of candidates. And once you've got some candidates to interview, you should look at their work samples, and you should also tell them what designs you're specifically drawn to and why. And this will give them a sense of the design direction that you're going for. Some people will call this a mood board. And, you know, it's as you're going through the design brief, you'll probably want to collect different example logos along the way to hand off to your designer. So you'll want to have a discussion to make sure you're comfortable with the working dynamic of this particular individual. It's always best to ask for references to understand how previous clients reacted and interacted with the designer's design process. I mean, every consultant and designer has a different process. You want to make sure that works with the way you work. And so you might also want to do a small test project to gauge how they communicate and their working style. And that's something that we commonly do when we're hiring consultants, just to see, you know, how responsive are they? Are they communicating enough for the needs of the team? So alternatively, if you're not ready to bring on a team member or even a consultant, you can host a design contest on a site like 99 Designs. That's actually what we did here for the PickFu logo years ago when the team was much smaller. And so we're still using that logo today. What's nice about a design contest is that your logo brief is shared with designers all over the world who will compete to win your contest by submitting a whole bunch of different logo designs. And so during our design contest, we received over 350 designs, which is crazy to think about. From a cost perspective, this was a great value. But it was also very, very overwhelming trying to judge all those different submissions because, you know, they logo after logo of PickFu logos, it starts to just become a big blur, and it's really hard to make that decision, which one's the best one.
Yeah, so, you know, then how do you choose that final design, right? This is the step 3 of the 3-step process. So I always like to say, you know, if you've gone wine tasting, part of the skill of wine tasting is being able to describe the wine, right? You know, taste is subjective, but if you can tell, you know, your waiter or whoever is leading the tasting what you like and what you don't like, that helps you have a better experience. And the same goes for logos. You have to be able to pinpoint what it is that you're responding to and what is not quite working, right? So it's not enough to say, I don't like it. You have to be able to articulate exactly what it is that you do or do not like. And so it begs the question, right? What makes a logo good? And, you know, here are some questions that you might want to consider. So first off, is the logo clear, right? Is the name of your company readable? Does the design help convey what your business does? And then does the style of the logo reflect your company values, right? So logos communicate in very understated ways. So colors, typeface styles, imagery. And so you want to make sure your customers are reading the message between the lines, right? Do they kind of see this as something that's trustworthy or approachable, or is it cutting edge? Is it modern? Is it sleek, etc.? And then will it last, right? So many logo designs really just follow trends. And so if you're really thinking, you know, like Justin said, we designed our logo like going on 10 years now. Can you say the same about the design that you are kind of, you know, drawn to in 10 years? Is this still going to work? Is it going to work in any application, right? Does it cover all the bases? Can you see this in printed signage? Can you see it in social media channels? Can you see it on your website? Can you see it on your email signature and any other format that you need? Can you sort of see this thing working in lots of different applications? And that means, by the way, in color, in black and white, will it go on swag, etc. And then finally, is it memorable? Is it distinct, or does it kind of look like you could swap out your company name for any other company name and it would still be fine, right? Does it stand out, especially among your competitors? And so these are all good questions to ask yourself and to set the standard, right? Because you really do want to have this logo mean something for your company and for your employees and for everybody that comes into contact with it. But these aren't easy questions to answer, and I don't think that you should answer them completely on your own. So what should you do, John?
So you should definitely not be answering these on your own. You should not be making this decision in a vacuum. So to help choose a winning logo design, you should be asking a group of unbiased people what they think. And you want to make sure that this group is reflective of your target audience in terms of age, gender, and behavior. Obviously, PickFu is a perfect avenue to do that. You can start really broad with different logo concepts and then narrow in to decide on exactly what kind of fonts and colors you want. So we can take a look at some sample polls here. So starting from broad, here you have a company who's in the tax business, tax work, and you can see that the 4 different logo designs here in this ranked poll are very different from each other. And so this is sort of, you can imagine this sort of earlier in your design phase of if you are working with either a couple of different designers or you have the designer give you a couple of different options or directions, then you can have a poll like this where you're just testing the general concept. Does tax work with like a large graphical element on the side of the words, or a smaller one, or maybe no graphical elements at all in option C, or a small tiny little divider between the word tax and work in option D. And in this case, this poll was targeting 50 respondents from the general population, and option A was the winner. And then here we have also in sort of the broad testing category, you have IGC imports. Obviously, you see that there are 4 quite different variations on this logo between sort of a rounded element in option C, sort of a square 3D cube in option B, just a graphical letter version in option A, and then the winner here was sort of a overlapping sort of colored circles for option D. And this one was a fun one. I like this a lot, not just because I like sushi, but this looks like it's a logo design for a sushi restaurant, and these are vastly different, right? You have the really sort of cartoonish ones on what looks like salmon on option D, and then option A and C have similar designs, but just with different interior graphics of both the font, little graphical element on top, and then the chopsticks. And then you have option B, which is sort of simplistic but bold, like a really bright orange pop of color with the chopsticks and the font, and that was the winner here. And then once you've narrowed down sort of which direction you want to take, then you can start running polls to get to start honing in on those individual design elements that now once you have a direction, you can sort of iterate on like the things like the font, things like the exact graphic that you're going to use. So here's an example where the question is, which logo do you prefer for an LGBTQ women's meetup group? 2 different fonts are used here for her city. So you see how this is a great example of a poll where you're only testing one thing at a time. And in this case, what you're testing is the font. And you see the graphical element across the top is the same for Toronto. And it's just the taller font or the shorter font for the her city name. And in this case, option A, the taller font one. You see another example of this where you're iterating sort of on smaller details. So does it make sense for the brand Redford to have their bear graphical element as part of the R versus an individual part separate from the R, where the name Redford could be more easily read and understood. And in this case, they were testing the customer was testing 50 Amazon Prime respondents. And so by an overwhelming margin, they chose, people chose option B here. And then there's also this example where it looks like they are testing basically the size of the graphical element here. So almost everything else is similar, where Team FG, the font, the colors on FG, the tagline underneath. But I can definitely see this this example coming up pretty often, right? When you have a designer who's going to put a graphical element there, do you want, I can't even describe it. Do you want 3 little things on the side, or do you want 5 things on the side, like a half circle, or do you want the full circle of octopus looking, this is why I'm not a designer. But this is why you put things up on PickFu here, where the customer was asking, which version of this logo looks best for a company that connects the dots for building a brand. And so they asked 50 people from the general population, and the full dot 360 degree circle was the one that won here.
More dots.
Yes. So
more dots. You can't have enough dots here.
That's right. We've got all these PickFu polls, and yes, we've got a winner, right? And maybe you just want to run with the winner. But what else should we be looking for as we're analyzing these polls?
Yeah. So as you're running these polls, you'll definitely want to look for recurring themes. So you'll want to read through the responses and see whether they're using the same attributes, talking about the same attributes that you're hoping that your logo would convey in your design brief. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. First is to ask a generic question to see what comes back. And I think we have a specific example of that. So in this one, they're asking just the general population, and they're asking a very generic question of which logo is more appealing. And what they're looking for is, if you go through some of the respondents, is the terminology that kind of resonates with what they're going for. And you'll see that the winning option actually has a lot of people describing things as clean and global and professional and high tech. And if that's the brand sentiment that you're going for, like that means you're kind of spot on with this option, and you can start iterating into more minute details, kind of like in the examples that John was talking about before. The second approach is to ask a more pointed question and to see whether respondents agree. So in this example, the customer is asking about a modern and minimal design that they're looking for. And I think what's interesting, if you look in option B, in one of the respondents, they actually said it didn't capture the minimalism that you were searching for. And so you can tell that they are taking that context that the customer gave in the question and applying that criteria to their answers, right? And maybe that would have been different if they just said which one was more appealing to you. But the fact that they're saying we're looking for a modern minimalist logo, and the respondents are doing their best to apply that criteria to these options. So that's a really great way to make sure that the brand values that you're going for are reflected in the logo. The third approach is to just do an open-ended poll to see what people say about a single logo without any context. And so you might use this as a final sanity check before your final decision. Just like, all right, this is what we're going with. Let's just make sure that the words that people are saying about our brand and our logo are the words that we want them to be saying. So so this is a great way to do that. And as you read through these responses, you'll get a sense like, get a sense of calmness. Depending on what you're looking for, you'll want to make sure that the repetition of words is in there. You can use the filtering to see the word cloud. So the last point I want to make is that if your service is aimed at a particular demographic group, then those are the people that are most important to your business. So you should use the demographic targeting on your PickFu poll to try to reach the approximate same audience that you're looking to attract. If you think your business is better suited for the general audience, then definitely do a general population poll. But you should still look at the demographic breakdowns that we have on each poll to ensure that the poll is resonating with the right people. Like maybe there's a slight skew towards age that you want to make sure that it resonates well for, even though you don't want to exclude everyone's opinion.
Yeah, so hopefully, that is helpful as you start to, navigate this whole scene. I want to invite anybody that's watching to ask us any questions. Again, you can go to this link and you can submit your questions there. But just final thoughts as we wrap. One tip that I would like to add is that you want to keep all of the logos that you're testing the same dimensions. And the reason that you want to do that is you might have a logo that's significantly bigger than another one. And what will happen a lot of the time is respondents will respond to the size of the logo rather than the content of the logo. And so to kind of normalize for that, just make sure that everything that you're submitting is, basically has the same dimensions, right? Don't test a vertical logo against a horizontal logo, right? Like you want to keep things fairly similar in that way. Do you guys have any other tips that you could add?
I mean, I think that's the most important thing. I think also just image quality. So making sure one is not more pixelated than the other. If you are changing directions and you're going from a horizontal to a vertical, I would make sure that the image is a square.
Yeah.
So that
bounding box.
so that it kind of resizes properly.
Yep.
And context also. Like if I've seen some people where they're trying to test against an existing logo and maybe they'll just take a screenshot of their logo on their web page and it's totally different than just the plain logo that they're getting from their designer. So like one's got color and maybe part of the web page and totally out of context, right? Like you need to make sure that if you're comparing clean logo to clean logo and not, just some random snapshot of a logo.
One other thing I've seen work effectively is also once a direction is set for a logo, sort of riffing on Justin's point about being in context. The context that your customers are going to see your logo is when they're comparing against your competition. So one sort of interesting way of sort of stress testing your logo or the logo that you might want to work with is actually putting up a competitive test against your existing competitors' logos out in the marketplace and getting an idea of seeing just how your target audience might respond to that, right? You can have it open-ended and just have them and just ask them what logo they prefer and why, and sort of process that feedback. Or if you have those brand targets and attributes that you wanted to go for, like classy or modern or so on, then it's easy to put up a poll and ask a question about which logo feels the most modern or the most classy or sophisticated or family friendly, and then really be able to dig into those responses from your target audience while you're in that design process. And that's a much better time to get that feedback than after you've already launched with your logo.
Yeah, I like that context of the competition. And speaking of context, you can also do overlaying of your logos on where it's going to be used. So
yes,
I don't think we touched on this, but like if you're doing product packaging and you're able to do a 3D render or something like that, where you can overlay the actual context it's going to be used, right? Because if you're selling nutritional supplements or something and you want to make sure it looks good on a bottle, then that's how you should test it. Just to go down the checklist that Kim was talking about, where you're thinking about where it's going to be used, like actually test it in those environments, different variations or against competitors.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to say hello and thank you for watching, Rick. One other tip that I would add is ensure when you're testing a logo design that that's the only thing that you're testing.
Yeah.
If you're still in the early stages of your business and you're deciding on a name for your business or for your product, you don't want to change that up in the test, right? Because what's going to happen is some people might like the name in option B, but they like the design in option A, and they're like, wait, what am I supposed to be doing, right? And so that muddles your results. And the same thing, right, with taglines, right? Don't start mixing up different taglines in your logo tests. Keep everything the same, at least for now, right? And then start, as you kind of start to decide on a logo, then maybe you test that logo with a couple of different taglines, right? But it's the same logo design. Or same thing with a business name. It's the same logo design, but maybe the business name is a little bit different. So keep that isolated, because otherwise you're going to start to muddy the waters, and people are going to react to different things, and everybody's going to kind of bring a different perspective to how they should answer the question.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
All right. Well, this was fun. I hope that this was helpful to everybody out there watching, and we will catch you next month. Thanks for joining us.